Right, yeah, thanks, Jacques. Let's talk a little bit about Remembrance Day, which is what we celebrate in the UK and British Commonwealth, or the Commonwealth of Nations as it is now, on the 11th of November. Next slide, please. So as Paul mentioned, we'd all started with Armistice Day, and Remembrance Day has obviously evolved out of Armistice Day. The first official Armistice Day commemoration was held on the grounds of Buckingham Palace on the 11th of November 1919, so 1 year after the end of World War I. The funeral of the unknown soldier was taking place at the London Cenotaph in 1920, more about the Cenotaph in a couple of slides. And then in 1921, the British Legion began offering poppies in return for donations to raise funds for ex-servicemen. As Paul mentioned again, World War II came along, and really then there was a push to change the name of the commemoration to something other than just the armistice in World War I. And the US changed it to Veterans Day. In the Commonwealth, we changed it. In the UK, we changed it to Remembrance Day. And then because Remembrance Day, the 11th, actually falls on a different day of the week, depending on the year, we wanted to have one day in the UK where it was always fixed. So the second Sunday in November, it's called Remembrance Sunday, and that's when all of the major commemoration events take place. Next slide, please. The observance is pretty much the same across all of these services. Generally, a 2-minute silence is observed at 11 o'clock on the 11th of November. Obviously, that's when World War I hostilities ended, as both Paul and Jacques mentioned, on the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. The service of remembrance includes the sounding of the last post, the 2 minutes of silence, and then sounding the rouse. Both of these soundings are on bugles traditionally, and a lot of people get confused between reveille and the rouse, and the rouse is actually the shorter one, which would normally be sounded in the morning to get everybody up and going again. So the service of remembrance is finished by recitation of the Ode of Remembrance. This also comes from a poem, this time by Lawrence Binyon, and was first published in the Times of London in September 1914. It's the fourth verse of this poem, For the Fallen, whereas a lot of people entered World War I, certainly on the Allied side, a little bit gung-ho, thinking it would be over very quickly. As we know, it was a horrible war that took 4 years. Binyon was a bit more circumspect, a bit more sober about it, and he wrote that in his poetry that was published. And this is the Ode of Remembrance that finishes the service of remembrance in the UK. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. But the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Cenotaphs, what are cenotaphs? They're actually literally from the Greek meaning an empty tomb, and it's the site of many of the remembrance services across the UK and the Commonwealth. All the capital cities have them pretty much, and in some of the larger cities as well. And they represent the centre for a ritual, which is the service of remembrance, but really that's a stylised night vigil over the slain of the battlefield. And of course, this was quite common because, one, you didn't know whether people were actually dead, so they would take guard over them just in case they actually came to, and also to actually guard the bodies from being harassed by the enemy or that sort of thing. So it's not really just remembrance, but it's really guarding the honour of the war dead. And all these ceremonies involve the laying of wreaths of poppies, and obviously, as we know, that the laying of wreaths is an ancient honour that goes back in ancient Greece and Rome. It's one of the highest honours you can have. The picture here is the cenotaph in Whitehall in London, which was unveiled in 1920 for Armistice Day. So I mentioned Remembrance Sunday. This is the second Sunday in November, first held in 1946. So the fixed date when all the services can take place. There is a big national cemetery at the Cenotaph in London, and that will be attended by the royal family and major politicians and other dignitaries, and they will all lay wreaths. And then there'll be a march past by literally thousands of military, ex-servicemen and women, cadets like Army cadets, Air cadets, etc., and the youth organisations such as the Scouts and Guides. And it's a fascinating thing to see if you ever see it on TV. We're fortunate enough to see it live, particularly of the ex-service men and women, many of whom are disabled, and they make a tremendous effort to go there and take part in the parade. And these national ceremony is also accompanied by ceremonies across the UK, the local war memorials. The picture here is of the War Memorial in Danbury in Essex, about 30 miles northeast of London, which is where I took part in many remembrance services as a member of the Royal British Legion. And this was actually dates from 1920. And we would have a service in the church in Danbury and then march down with the other veterans to the War Memorial and have a short mini service there. So I mentioned the Royal British Legion. This was actually formed as the British Legion in 1921, a merger of 3 ex-service organisations who were raising funds for injured and disabled ex-service men. One of the founders was Field Marshal the First Lord Earl Haig, who was the British commander at the very large Battle of the Somme and Passchendaele, and horrible battles over in Europe. It gained a royal charter in 1925, and obviously the current patron is Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. They have 2 events. One is the Poppy Appeal, which is their fundraising drive by offering poppies in return for donations. And they also hold the Festival of Remembrance at the Royal Albert Hall on the Saturday evening before Remembrance Sunday. It's a very emotional event. The royal family is generally in attendance, and I was fortunate enough to attend this many years ago. It's a very moving event. Next slide, please. Poppy is the symbol of Remembrance Day. This is the Remembrance Poppy, which is actually a trademark of the Royal British Legion. I think every country has its own version of it with its own trademark. And these are offered in return for donations from about late October until mid-November. Everybody will wear one in the UK, pretty much, general public, politicians, royal family, of course, other public figures, people on TV, newscasters, that sort of thing. Just to give you an idea of how much money they raised, in 2018 alone, they raised £55 million, about $74 million in funds to help ex-service people. 40 million poppies, 7 million pin badges, and they ran about 500 community events to raise that sort of money. It's not without controversy. There are people who say that the Legion is perpetuating the celebration of war, which of course is the total opposite of what it's really trying to do. There are people who've worn white poppies since the 1930s as a pacifist version of the red poppy. And there is a thing in the UK called poppy fascism, which is where basically celebrities and other people in the public eye can get shamed for not wearing poppies. So there apparently is a little bit of pressure to do that. But certainly in the UK, I would have poppy. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is a picture that I took in 2014 in London, just after Remembrance Day. This is a public art installation, which was actually created in the dry moat of the Tower of London. For those of you who have been to London, you know the moat is actually dry. There's no water there. And this was actually done to commemorate the 100 years from the start of World War I. It was called Blood-Swept Lands and Seas of Red, and was 888,246 ceramic poppies, one for each British Empire soldier killed in World War I. Those poppies are quite large, they're about 4 inches across. It's a very moving thing to see, and I'm glad that I just happened to be there in London at that time to see it. So that's Remembrance Day in the UK. Thank you.